Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our November 23rd City Council meeting. I'd like to note that we are all here with the exception of our dearly departed colleague, Patricia Culhane. I will ask the Director of Corporate Services and City Clerk, Mr. McDonald, to lead us in a moment of reflection.
May we be worthy custodians of all that has been entrusted to us. Help us to be concerned only for what will promote good government. May we bring to our council chamber minds that think and hearts that feel, always having respect for others so that we may serve the people of our city in a helpful manner and for the good of all.
Can I ask everyone to keep standing? I'm going to first ask for a motion to that pursuant to section 410 of the bylaw, number 2019-48, the procedural bylaw, that the rules be suspended. Moved by Councillor Sandison, seconded by Councillor Thompson. All in favor? It's carried. Thank you. We now have a video presentation that we are going to play, and I'll invite Mr. Dilmage to come forward and do his thing with the bagpipes that I know that Pat would have really enjoyed. If we can stay standing for this, please. We can just have one more moment of silence for our colleague, Pat Culhane. Thank you. You may be seated. my colleagues and family of Patricia Culhane and residents of the City of Belleville. It was a tremendous shock to all of us, and indeed the entire community, to hear the news of the death of Councillor Patricia Culhane. In the 2 weeks since, we're slowly coming to terms with it, but it's still very raw. As a proud nurse for 50 years, Pat was used to dealing with death, and she had very strong opinions about how she wanted hers to be handled. COVID-19 impacted that planning, but I hope the arrangements made to honor her would have been what she wanted. I hope we've done justice to the positive impact she made for the benefit of all of us in the City of Belleville and our region. It was touching to see the outpouring of expressions of condolence, not just from the people that Pat served with, but also from general members of the community. It was proof of her efforts made over the years and the lives that she touched. As I mentioned, the suddenness of her passing was a shock to all of us, and when City Council last met on November the 9th, it was a very difficult meeting. It is still no less difficult this afternoon, but we've now had some time to process. We all have something we want to say about our dear colleague Pat Culhane, and I think it's most appropriate with her family in attendance this afternoon. Thank you to the Culhane family for joining us. You know, for me, I found that Pat was a complex person who wasn't afraid to try to make something better or to approach controversial issues. When lesser people were afraid to broach a subject, she had a way to get straight to the heart of the matter with a laser-like precision that sometimes made some uncomfortable. Uncomfortable for some especially if they really didn't want to do anything about a problem, but weren't courageous enough to say so. Pat rocked the boat when she felt it needed rocking because she cared for people and she fundamentally wanted to make things better. And she hated creating a cycle of dependency. She would often express to me how much she hated accepting the current outcomes for many people on our support programs because there just wasn't enough effort in her mind going into getting them to be able to look after themselves. Because she felt that once they got onto a program, it seemed it was designed in such a way that they couldn't get off. The stories of Pat welcoming people into her home while they got on their feet and other help are not just stories. People would come forward and tell me how they were direct recipients of her kindness and her compassion. You know, under her desk here at the council table, there are boxes of saran wrap and aluminum foil. After every city council meeting, if there were any sandwiches left over, Pat would make up plates of food. She would offer one to George, who works the door here as her security guard. And depending on how much of it was left, if there was more, she would take the food to the warming center or the Salvation Army or somewhere that had people in need. And she did so without fanfare and not for recognition, but just to help someone in need. There are lots of stories like that about Pat. There are also lots of stories about Pat's frugalness. She hated seeing money wasted. That's one of the reasons she was so much against the duplication of services. She didn't have time to waste, and she didn't have time for waste. And this is why she didn't suffer fools well either. Her previous bouts of cancer put her in a position where she told me that she didn't have the time to waste, and she worked so hard to make a difference while she could. I think this is why Pat loved being a city councillor so much, particularly over the past 2 years. She felt it was important not just to occupy a seat here at Belleville City Council, but to also be a strong voice for those she felt should be heard in our decision-making. Pat was also a very good city councillor. She was one of the best natural speakers I have met, and I would say the best I myself have seen around this table. I remember being invited to attend her 50th anniversary party when she retired from nursing. It was during the 2018 election, and there was a huge crowd and lots of stories of the Pat we know, how she helped people when they were in need, how she made a difference in their lives, and how she fought the system on their behalf. When it was Pat's turn to speak, she did it without notes and off the top of her head. Hilariously funny, incredibly honest and compassionate, and very much on point. She spoke so well to those people who she knew so well. Now, you would not see those people there that day in that crowd. They would not be at our big-ticket community fundraisers or our high-end restaurants. These were just salt-of-the-earth people who lived their lives in our community, people who raised families, people who experienced hardship and heartache, and people who loved that Pat fought for them. She did such a good job in representing them and their needs and aspirations. They loved her, and she loved them, and she was proud to be one of them. I will always remember that deep love that was shown to her. You know, early in 2019, after I became mayor, I attended an event at the Legion with Pat. And she took me around to introduce me to some of the members. And she would introduce me as the new mayor and make a kind comment about why that was good for them to know. She would say, you know, this is Mayor Panchuk, and he knows you or knows this issue that you have, and you know, he's going to be a good guy for the job. And every single time she did that, those people would smile at me and say, that's nice. And then almost dismissing me, would immediately start talking to Pat about something that they had shared or a person that they knew or something that they wanted her to know about. Now, they weren't being rude or mean by it to me. They just preferred to speak with Pat over anyone else. She was a strong voice for her community, and certainly a strong voice is how I would describe her. She really exercised that voice this term. She was a voice for the only reason we should be here at City Council, for the people. Especially for those whom she saw as marginalized, including the poor, seniors, and most importantly, for women. Pat wanted women to know that they should be on City Council and that it was okay to have an opinion and voice it in spite of opposition. She saw herself very much as a role model in that respect. Pat and I had a number of conversations about what we could do to encourage more women to become interested in serving on Belleville City Council. She had strong feelings and she wanted to see changes. There will be opportunities in the future for this council to continue to do the work on her behalf that she advocated for. You know, personally, Pat and I worked hard since 2019 on our professional relationship. And while we didn't always agree, we respected each other. We were fair to each other, and she would always tell me, that she could put up with a lot, but don't you lie to me. I never did. Pat would test people to see if they could live up to her expectations. She would challenge them to find out about what they were really made of and what they really thought about an issue. Sometimes, over the past couple years, when she riled up a colleague by fighting passionately about an issue, she would apologize to me afterwards for creating a controversy. She would say, you know, I'm sorry, Mayor, I've caused some problems for you today. And I would always reply to her that as an elected city councillor, she had every right to voice her opinion. And she would thank me and tell me that she knew I believed that. And that's why she was having so much fun this term. And then she would almost always say, besides, who can be mad at a crazy old lady? You know, she was crazy like a fox, because her greatest strength, and she used it to her advantage without people even knowing it, but her greatest strength was in being underestimated. And anyone who underestimated her in life or afterwards does so at their own peril. It will be a long time before we see someone like Pat again. She was an important part of our city council, and her death will not prevent her from continuing to be an important part of the remainder of our term. To her son Tim and her family and friends, we thank you for allowing her to serve an important role in shaping our community. We offer you our sympathies and our condolences. We share in your loss, and we'll take up the torch from her as we do our part to honor and defend her legacy. Farewell, Pat Culhane, good and faithful servant. You have done your duty well. You have left this place better than you found it. You have earned your rest and a place at the right hand of your Savior. Now I'll call on Councillor Millette to say a few words.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll be brief, but I want to, from the bottom of my heart, give my condolences to Pat's family and thank you. And I think the showing on Saturday gave you an idea just how much love Pat Trish was in the community is. I recall I hadn't seen Pat in a number of years prior to the 2018 election, and we were at an event down by the riverfront, and it was a women's march, and I think she was with Councillor McCaw, and Pat came up to me at that event, and my daughter was helping organize it, by the way, and Pat came up to me and she pulled me aside and she says, "What the hell are you doing, Millette?" I said, "Pat, I haven't seen you in a while." "Nice to see you too." And she says, "Just what the hell you think you're doing?" And I said, "I'm here to support the Women's March." She goes, No, running for council." And I said, "Oh, well, same thing you are, Pat, trying to help the city." She said, "Oh, BS," in her own inimitable way. And then we had a great chat as to why. And then she said, "You know what? I always thought you would be fun on council." That was her words, fun on council. So as a guy who threw brickbats for a living for so long and covered this place for so long, Pat and I came to understand each other that, she had her own way of doing things. I thought I knew how this place worked until I got inside it. I've never had more fun than some of the shared moments with Pat when we would be at, say, a conference in Toronto. And just quietly chatting, listening to, and we shared stories. And in the council lounge, Pat would love to just share stories. She kept inviting me over to the house. "I've got beer, We've got similar stories, but we've got great stories. Let's tell stories." Pat just wanted to tell stories. But we would be at a conference, and the mayor mentioned how delightfully frugal Pat was. And we'd be at a conference where there would be a lunch put on, and it was, it was part of the program. Pat would know. She had her squirreled away stuff that she had taken from little buffets here and there up in the room, and she had her own little, package put together. No, I've got my own little goodies. And she'd open a bag, and she had that ratty old cloth bag, and you'd look inside, and there's muffins, and there's little packages of fruit. But God bless her, she was looking after the public dollars. So it's just I can't tell you enough how much fun it was serving with Pat and her commitment, as was said, to the little guy. And she will be dearly, dearly missed in this chamber and in this city. And to all the people at Belleville General Hospital, I know just how much they're going to miss her as well. So to all of you, to the Culhane family, God bless, and in Pat's memory, Godspeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Millette. Councillor Williams.
And I'll sit down if that's okay, otherwise you won't hear me too tall. But I echo the sentiments of many, I'm sure, which will be many a story from my colleagues, and all the best to the Culhane family. There was about 30-some years between Pat and I, and even though sometimes I feel I'm pretty old at 41, Pat would often exclaim how young I was, my youthful exuberance, and the difference. But I learned a lot from Pat. Sat next to her for a little while around the horseshoe. My big things that I learned from her was to accept your responsibility, just like the mayor had said, that Pat really believed that we need to accept our responsibility and take ownership of our actions. And she was really great at that. And when she had an idea, she kept it. It was very hard to change Pat's mind at all at any time. And that was really great about Pat. She believed in her convictions. She spoke very loudly and proudly. As the mayor said, she spoke very well. And I really admired her for that. There was a lot. I really liked Pat's humor as well. I remember the bun feeds, which she'd show up, a lot of people wouldn't. And she was not afraid to show up and debate. I think the one that was about probably 8 years ago or 7 years ago was when she showed up and she had hats on for the fire chief and then for the police captain, and she had a funny skit, and she would do that. She would put herself out there, and she didn't care. She just would do it, and good for her. And I think just being able to listen to Pat and to the experience she had and what she has brought to the city for years was just great to be around. And I'll always remember Pat just for being that voice that was there that talked about how things were and how she believed things should be, and how great was that for all of us around council and for the city. So thank you, Pat, and as all said, God bless.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Sandison.
Thank you, Your Worship. I prepared some notes just to make sure I stay on track. So to Pat's family, she was a wonderful lady. 2 years ago, I met Pat as a result of being elected to council, and it took no time at all to warm up to Pat, and for her to warm up to myself and my wife, Christine. That's just who Pat was. She had an open door and an open heart for anybody and everybody. Pat was a warrior in her advocacy for residents of the city of Belleville and stood her ground, always taking the position that best represented the residents of this great city. Pat was selfless in her mission, and around the council table, Councillor Pat Culhane asked only to be heard and to be respected. Socially, Pat had no boundaries, endearing herself to all that came into sight. Pat reached out without hesitation. That's just who Pat was. I believe that while life's journey is important, it's the people you meet along the way that makes it worthwhile, and Pat was one of those people. Unrelated to her passing, but on the very next day, I happened to read a poem by an unknown author that I'd like to share with her family. It's called The Train of Life. At birth, we board the train and meet our parents, and we believe they will always travel by our side. As time goes by, other people will board the train, and they will be significant, our siblings, friends, children, and even the love of our life. However, at some station, our parents will step down from the train, leaving us on this journey alone. Others will step down over time and leave a permanent vacuum. Some, however, will go so unnoticed that we don't realize they vacated their seats. The train ride will be full of joy, sorrow, fantasy, expectations, hellos, goodbyes, and farewells. Success consists of having a good relationship with all passengers, requiring that we give the best of ourselves. The mystery to everyone is we do not know at which station we ourselves will step down. So we must live in the best way, love, forgive, and offer the best of who we are. It is important to do this because when the time comes for us to step down and leave our seat empty, we should leave behind beautiful memories for those who continue to travel on the train of life. I wish you all a joyful journey. Pat offered the best of who she could be, and it was my pleasure and my privilege to be a passenger on her train. God bless.
Thank you, Councillor Sandison. Councillor McCaw.
Thank you, Your Worship. There's a whole lot of things I could say about Pat Culhane, but I think it's best summed up by a quote that I found. Be more concerned about your character than your reputation. Your character is who you are. Your reputation is who people think you are. And she was our character. She was a strong advocate for the Quinte Humane Society. She wanted to see the shelter built. Today, the Quinte Humane Society, its board members, and its staff have introduced a brand new initiative in her name, and it will be called the Pat Culhane Legacy Council, There'll be further details coming out about that in the coming days. A few final thoughts, and I know people have a lot of thoughts. Pat was a strong advocate for women. She believed they should be involved in political advocacy. She talked about how more women should become engaged in matters of government because the fear of inequality among male peers, she wanted people to feel at ease and not feel as though inequality should stand in their way. She was a voice for women, young and old. Pat was a voice for many others who didn't have a voice for themselves. And one of her last phrases to me was sent in a text message, and it read like this: power to the people. And that is exactly the goal that Pat and I shared. Power to all people, and not just those with money and perceived influence, or those who considered themselves the ruling class. So the gatekeeper in this regard may have left us, but her legacy will continue, and it will be business as usual for Pat. It will be power to all the people. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McCaw. Councillor Carr.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to extend my condolences to Pat's family. I hope you feel the community's thoughts and prayers are with you at this time. I'm going to miss having Councillor Culhane sit next to me during the meetings and listening to her straightforward, principled debates. She would leave no doubt, and it's been said already, where her positions lied. And she always had the best interests of the community and her constituents at heart. On a lighter note, and the mayor referred to it, she was very practical, and she never wanted anything to go to waste. And it was referred to having saran wrap around the 4th floor of City Hall. In fact, she would have them tucked in her drawers right here. Not one, not two, but be prepared. And if you ever walk back into the council lounge and she would be wrapping up some food that was back there, and you would look and she would say, "I hate to see things go to waste." And then she would just quietly take that food to somebody who was in need. And that says a lot about her and her character for sure. She always took an interest in people, including everyone in this room. And it wasn't just about council debate, as has been referred to. She liked to talk about stories and tell stories. And every time we would cross paths, she would say to me, we need to talk about your career in corrections. I want to hear all about it. And so I would share a few stories about my career, and inevitably, she would turn the conversation to people less fortunate, people in need, people with mental health. She was that concerned and wanted to know more and consume to get a better understanding, and then she would take that knowledge and she would turn it into practical service in her community, and it was amazing to see. We can all agree that Councillor Culhane has left a legacy of service to her community, and whether it be in healthcare or in municipal governance. And for that, we as a council and as a community are forever grateful. She will be missed.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Condolences to the Culhane family. I've known Pat for a long, long time. Fond memories of Councillor Culhane. My thoughts mostly of years with her as a councillor from 2006 to 2014, and now in this term, and her many, many aspects of her social community and area that she was concerned with. My wife and I had the pleasure of having dinner at her place with her guests, her brother, and her dog. That one will never be forgotten. I would often go to her place and have a beer with her, discuss politics, life, and in general, always getting some advice, either from medical issues or politics. And she was good at both. Sitting beside Pat around the horn for 8 years, we would often check each other's where we were in the very complex budget time. She would say to me, "What page are we on?" And I'd say, "I don't know, Pat. We better ask somebody else." And that was the first few years. It was really a joke between the two of us. She brought much dedication and integrity to the position of councillor. How many times I would be with and see Pat pull out her wallet and checkbook and write a check to so many events and fundraisers. She was definitely a giver of her heart, soul, and her money. I can see why that lady worked umpteen jobs, because she couldn't afford it on one salary because she gave every cent away, it seemed. She was always writing a check. Pat always wanted the best for the city she was born and raised in. When back on council this time, she wanted to do the stuff she didn't get done the first time, and she was determined to get them done now. She felt she had one term left, and that was the term she was going to do it. She was always afraid she may not get another term, whether she wanted it or not. Pat was a fighter for issues she felt important. She will be missed, but her work will never be forgotten. And lastly, most often the most memorable time with Pat was the 8 years we slept out in boxes behind City Hall at the end of January, sometimes in 30 below weather to raise money for awareness for homelessness, for the Canadian Mental Health Association, now the Enrichment Centre. We were joined by past councillor Edgerton Boyce. Pat also brought her young nephew at times. But remember, Pat and I never did sleep together. Pat would always bring her lots to eat for everybody and would never be without a little thermos to help keep us through the night. So to Pat, this is what she would bring: lunch and a little thermos. And a sandwich for everybody to eat. She was very generous and she made enough for everybody. So at this time, I'd like to raise the thermos to Pat and sip for a little bit, and it only can be a little bit because it's not water. This is for Pat. God bless, and we will miss Pat tremendously.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Kelly.
First of all, thanks to the Mayor for giving us all an opportunity to speak tonight, and some great stories about our friend Pat Culhane. I've known Pat for years. We would meet at city events, but didn't really know each other until the last few years, working closely here at City Hall. So when I reflect about Patricia Culhane, what a life, what a legacy, loved by so many, accomplished so much in your 73 years. Amazing. It's so nice to see her family here tonight. Siblings Anne, Michael, Peter, Gregory, Stephen, Colleen, and John. Pat was predeceased by her parents, Frank and Doris, and her brother, Tim. The love of her life was her son, Tim, who couldn't be with us tonight. The Culhanes, the Irish Catholic family on Albert Street. At one point, 12 people in their duplex. 9 children, mom and dad, and grandpa. Their grandmother died young, so Frank and Doris had their grandfather, Culhane, move into the home. The home was a duplex, you heard me correct, on Albert Street. It had 4 rooms. Parents got one, Grandpa got one, and the 9 kids shared the other 2. That's fact, not fiction. So can you imagine the fun chaos in the Culhane home? Growing up in that environment, you quickly learn how to work as a team, you learn how to forgive, you learn to get along, and you also learn to stand up for yourself. Pat was so proud of her family and her upbringing. We used to compare notes. Since I'm from a large family, I grew up with 11 Kellys. Saturday morning, we witnessed how much Pat was loved by Belleville. It was wonderful to see so many folks come out, people that she has met in her walks of life, the nursing staff from years gone by at BGH, people that she helped out in the community, the Humane Society, all these different agencies, the first responders. They loved her, and that was shown on Saturday. And there would have been more, but due to COVID, people held back. Think about Pat's career. Think about it. We hear the number 50, and I hear some just throw it out there. 50 plus years in nursing. 50. Stressful job. Challenges every day. You don't know what's going to happen at the hospital. Think of that. 50 plus years, her time at BGH and up north. It's amazing. The characteristics of a nurse: caring, empathy, attention to detail, stamina, sense of humor, critical thinking, leadership, time management, communication skills, willingness to learn and listen. I think it's fair to say Pat used these skills in her everyday life, including here at City Hall. Some of these skills were developed growing up on Albert Street with her siblings. Her sister Ann told me last week, and we saw it in the memorial for our friend Patricia on the weekend. Another amazing story, really impressive. She learned to speak Greek at the age of 13. The story is she was babysitting for a Greek family here in Belleville. The grandmother had moved from Greece to come and live in the friendly city. Pat was there with the kids. Granny couldn't speak English from Greece, so they exchanged languages. Pat learns Greek, and Granny learns English. So Pat was fluent in Greek. Started that at 13. She was always working for others. I witnessed that in the last 2 years like I've never seen before. Trying to make a difference, making their situation a little better. Tonight I want to share some of those comments. Dr. John Bond, longtime doctor in this area, tweeted on November the 9th, "I worked side by side with this saint for more than 40 years at BGH. One of the best nurses ever and a true friend." That's from respected Dr. John Bond. I found these comments online too. These are the people she worked and have known Pat for a long time. A lady by the name of Ruth Hatton. She writes on November the 16th, "I had the great honor and privilege to work alongside Pat at a number of organizational tables, including the Nurse Practitioner Task Force and the Doctor Recruitment Task Force. Pat was a tireless advocate for those that were homeless. We would have lively debates about how we as citizens can contribute to make Belleville a better inclusive community." Vicki Barrett writes on November the 14th, "A colleague of mine for 40 plus years at Belleville General Hospital. Pat was one who lived, caring, sharing, and passion for the nursing profession. As a friend and member of a family who extended so much love to this city, God bless you." These stories are endless. Those are a couple that I took from sites I watched. Some personal reflection about my friend, Patricia Culhane. She's been very helpful to me as a rookie councillor. I would reach out to her, bounce ideas off. This is what I'm thinking. And I had my own opinion. She had her opinion, but we had good debates and stuff that was coming up. She's always been very kind to my children, Liam and Taylor. She took an interest in my family, maybe the connection to raising children as a single parent. A lady in downtown Belleville by the name of Fran won a trip, a lifetime trip to Mexico for 2. And Patricia knew her last year. And she went around to the council members and other folks and raised money for our friend from downtown, over $300, so Fran would have even a more enjoyable trip. She wasn't asked to do that. She just did it. She led by example. About a year ago, she hosted a kitchen party, and I was invited. My brother Michael, it was the Kellys and the Culhanes. Cops were on close watch, and I know Councillor McCaw was there. We had a kitchen party. And Pat and Ann and the family and the Kellys brought some stuff, and we had a nice Irish meal and music. And I remember Pat, or one of the relatives there that night, taping us or sending live video via Facebook to relatives in Ireland. So it was such, and we talked about that just a month ago, about having, once COVID's done, let's get another Irish party going. Thanksgiving Monday was the last time we actually spent some time together working on a project. We were working on the warming center, coming up with ideas to make the homeless have a more comfortable situation in the city, and we're also trying to solve, at least talking about, the taxi issues in Belleville. And we spoke to some taxis. I think, Stephen, you might have been there coming in and out. And we had this conversation, and I'm sitting at the table, and she's in the kitchen, and she would run back to the table, and we had lined up people to speak to, people in the taxi business, and we also spoke to, on Thanksgiving Monday, we both were bothering some people at home from the peer support group downtown, but they took our call, and we were discussing ways and how we could move forward on the projects. But as we were having that conversation, there was a big pot of all the bones from the turkey meal she had the day before, huge pot. And she asked me before I came over, did you bring your bones from the turkey? And I said, no, I had thrown them out. Did I ever get a blast? But she was making soup for people in the neighborhood and working on projects. She led by example. On September the 4th, not that long ago, Pat came down. The city of Belleville with the pop-ups launched a new canoe that has been developed in Canada. And she came down and she had summer attire on, nice white pants and a nice top. And I said, Culhane, you're getting in the canoe. And she said, with you, do you have your license? And I said, yes. And she said, when did you get your license? I said, yesterday on YouTube, I passed the test. So I go in the canoe and the chat from the pop-up shop, and Pat's sitting in the center, and it was probably the windiest day on the Bay of Quinte. She was soaked. She had so much fun. I felt bad that she came in and got all wet. She sent me a text that night, and I still have it. It was at 6:30 at night, and she said, thank you, Sean. That was the best day I've had in a long time. She loved doing new things and challenging stuff. We're going to play something for you here. I had a conversation with Councillor Culhane back in April. She was a guest on a radio show I was doing. And I've taken 90 seconds of that interview to share with you tonight. I want you to listen to what Pat has to say. This might be your final opportunity to speak in council chambers. So, Donnie, if you're ready, feel free to play the tape.
Society on its head. And we realize that the people who do the frontline work are soldiers in their own right. They protect us and they support us and they carry us through. And the people stocking the shelves and bringing the food and working to keep those stores open, we have not valued those people. And we need to recognize that we have our priorities wrong, and we need to go forward recognizing that and recognizing people for their individual value. We don't look at the people around us, and we don't appreciate them, and we need to do that. That's where the real reward in life is. It's in other people and communicating with them and valuing their contributions. That's where you get your biggest reward. At least I do. And I love people, and yeah, they let you down. Sure, that's life. You meet the most interesting people right at your fingertips. The world around you is filled with interesting people, and everybody has a story. And if they're willing to tell it to you, then you come away a little richer, and they go away a little richer. It doesn't matter status in life. It matters how we treat one another and how we reach out to people. And that's, I think, the core of it. You have to reach out to people and let them know that you value them and you care about them. And you get slapped occasionally, but again, that's life.
So that was Pat back in April of this year. A couple of things here before we wrap it up. Saturday, I was one of the fortunate to get to the gravesite service at St. James Cemetery, and Reverend Ed Bentley read a nice message. And he said at the gravesite that this is something that he believed Pat would have signed off on. And I went up to Reverend Ed Bentley and asked him for a copy of this because I wanted to share it tonight. And here it is. I'd like the memory of me to be a happy one. I'd like to leave an afterglow of smiles when life is done. I'd like to leave an echo whispering softly down the ways of happy times and laughing times and bright and sunny days. I'd like the tears of those who grieve to dry before the sun of happy memories that I leave when life is done. Again, I want to thank the mayor for letting us speak. Maybe I'm going a bit too long, but I just got a couple more things because this has been very difficult on me. I missed her last night at the Santa Claus parade, and I mentioned that to my colleagues here, and we all agree. We missed her last night. We missed her today at earlier meetings. We missed her last week at Zoom meetings on committee work. We miss her. I've gone by the house a couple of times because any night of the week, if we didn't have meetings, I could text her and say, what are you up to? And it was a cup of tea or just a conversation because she reminded me of my sisters, my siblings, and she was a special lady. I'm so blessed to have known her and have all those wonderful memories. Finally, back in May with COVID-19, and I know this year's been a struggle for everyone, but Culhane was such a people person, and she was somewhat trapped in that home. So to add some fun to Pat's birthday, on her 73rd, I dressed up in my leprechaun suit, and I only take that out for special people. And I went to her home and played Happy Birthday on the violin. And she was on the phone talking to one of her friends, and I listened back to the video, and she's referring to a Joanne in the video, so I'm thinking it was probably Joanne Dodds, who spoke so well Saturday at the service. So, over the course of the last several months, when I would pop in, she would say to me, "Did you bring your fiddle?" I said, "No." And she said, "You got to bring your violin next time you're in. Play me a song." So tonight, I'm going to play that final song for Pat. I know she loved her Irish roots. God bless you, good friend. And I'm going to play a little song for Pat because I know she's smiling up in heaven. I'm going to do a song that was written in 1912 when Irish eyes are smiling for our friend Pat Culhane, and I hope I don't make a mess of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kelly, and thank you, colleagues. When we received word of Pat's passing, the flags at Belleville City Hall and all city buildings were at half staff. It remained half staff for 2 weeks, but halfway through, the flag that was flying was taken down so that we could package it up, and I'm going to present it to the family now. Pat would have had a chuckle because I forgot my mask when I went back there. I'm going to ask Councillor Kelly now to take the Book of a Condolence, and we'll take the Belleville City flag that has sat on Councillor Culhane's seat, as well as her coffee mug that was never empty, and then her water bottle that she could never find. If you could present those to the family, please. And I'm now going to ask Councillor McCaw to come forward. A number of municipalities reached out to us, a number of agencies that Pat served with or respected her sent us letters of condolence. There's also some newspaper articles regarding reporting on her passing, as well as her photo that we had here at City Hall, and her name tag, her councillor name tag. We will present that as well. You know, we had the good fortune of serving with Pat, and a lot of staff members also felt the same way, city staff that have seen councillors come and leave over the years, but there was truly an affection for her. We saw many out on Saturday. That flag, as I said to the Culhane family, is not just from City Council, but also from the city staff of the Corporation of the City of Belleville. I'm going to ask Anne, Pat's sister, now to come forward and to say a few words on behalf of the family. If I just remember to push that button, please, Anne. Red button, yeah.
Well, of course, the very first thing I have to say is thank you so much to Mayor Mitch. He was informed as soon as our sister became ill, and his support through that weekend and through this time has been so appreciated, so appreciated. And the council, my goodness, we were so happy with that City Hall, just not display, but you know, the City Hall tribute, and it was just perfect. It was just perfect. We loved, Trish and I loved to organize things together, and you did a perfect job. You really did. We couldn't have done better. I think it was the late 1800s that our great-grandfather Patrick and great-grandmother Catherine came from Ireland with nothing, of course, and they eventually settled in Reed, and they had 6 children, and when they were growing up, there was little work, and the Kodak plant was hiring, and you could do quite well in Rochester, and so 4 of the Culhanes went to Rochester, 2 men and 2 women, and 2 decided to stay here. And I will be forever grateful to our grandfather, Daniel Culhane, because he decided to stay here. Because, well, just for so many reasons. We love Belleville, we all do. And some of us have returned after working and are very happy being back, and they're happy, and we're happy, of course, that they are too. From those Irish roots came many characteristics, and every one of them certainly settled in our sister. But we're all big talkers. We love to talk. We love to tell stories, and what joy we've had through our lives because of that. Our brothers are difficult sometimes, but they're good storytellers too. I just want to tell you a couple of things. And I was much stronger till I heard your train, which I love so much. And thank you for saying that. And thank you to everyone. You all spoke so well. She was the one when she couldn't sleep at night. She would come downstairs quietly and she would scrub the kitchen floor. So Mom would get up. Mom kept an immaculate house. I don't know how she did with 12 children, but she did. But Trish would wash the kitchen floor. So Mom would get up to a nice clean floor. And she was the one who went to Helen and Jerry Chalamatis when she was 13 and begged them to give her a job. And they were reluctant, but they gave her a job peeling potatoes, and she did it. And then eventually, as Sean referred to, I ended up babysitting their child. And she and Grandma learned each other's languages. And oh boy, I could tell you stories for an hour about times in her life when she was in situations in restaurants or when there were people around, when people would say there were Greek people present, and boy, we all loved the Greek community here. But they would say something in Greek, and she would have a smart answer right back in Greek, and they would practically fall down. The stories from those occurrences are something. She was. I always told her she was the most intelligent person I've ever known. Oh, don't be silly. And she was so smart, and she did her homework in high school, her own, and several of the boys. I could mention their names, but they'd like all be watching. She was smart. She was stubborn. She was outspoken. She was wise, and she was wonderful. And she said to me one day in, I think it was 2006, guess what? And I said, what's that? And she said, I'm going to run for city council. I said, you are? And she said, yes. And I said, well, that's terrific. She had always dreamed of being a city councilor. So she said, I said, well, good for you. You'd be a great councilor. And she said, well, I want you to be the campaign manager. And I said, well, I've organized lots in my life, and I follow politics, particularly American, I'm afraid, and very much, but I don't know how to manage an election. She said, well, I don't know much about it either, so we'll just go together and we'll do it. And we did it. And every time she ran again in 10, and she ran for mayor in 14, and then she ran last in 18, I believe. And every time we'd have a little argument because she would say, you're going to be the campaign manager. I say, give me a break. I'm getting old here. Come on. Let's get someone younger. Let's get someone more vibrant. Absolutely not. So the memories I have of those campaigns will keep me going the rest of my life. fun we had and all of that. And I could, you know that, we could tell you stories for an hour about people and things that she did, not in public. I'm talking about things in private. And I'm going to give you one example. She was in a thrift shop. She loved thrift shops. It was like around, I don't know, it was 8 or 10 years ago. And there was a young woman, and she was sorting through some things, and she would look and see how much the item cost or whatever and put it down. And so, of course, Trish sauntered over and got chatting with her. And she came home and stopped at my house, and she said, you know, we've something to do. There's this woman, she's just moved to Belleville, leaving an abusive situation, excuse me, and she's got 3 or 4 little kids, and she has nothing. So she just swung into action with the help of the family, help of friends, and I swear to you, she had a big living room, and it was full. It was full within a week, including bicycles that had been donated and cleaned up and were sparkling and nice. And that little family, it was delivered on Christmas Eve. And she said, "Oh, Anne, you should have seen the children's faces." So, you know, that's one story of so many. She went to a conference once, back again in time, and she came home from the conference. She was head of the nurses union at the time. And, well, she said, I said, "How was the conference?" She said, "Oh, it was great. It was great. I met this, that, whatever." And she said, "You'll never guess what happened." And I said, "No." And she said, "Well, we had the big dinner at the end of the conference, and there were 500 people there." And she said, "Someone came over to me just as dinner was starting and said that they had just received word from the speaker that for whatever reason, he just couldn't come. Something had happened in his family." So the woman who approached her had, I don't know, she must have heard she was a good speaker. She said, "Would you take his place?" And she said, I said, "Really?" And she said, "Yep." I said, "Well, what'd you do?" "Well, I took his place." She said, I made a few notes through dinner. And she said, "I must admit, I got up there and slayed them." And so that was such a gift of hers, as was mentioned. And again, our family, all of us, are so grateful for the support she got here. And she was really enjoying this term. And she, I think there was a reason why she was so driven, but she really, really enjoyed it. And you will miss her, and we will miss her terribly. Thank you so much.
Well, it's been a difficult last few weeks, and we certainly hope that the memories will make it a little easier in the future. We hope that you've heard our stories. Some of it may be new to you, some of it may be something you knew of her, about her, she's already shared it with you, but it gives a little bit of context. We all appreciate the fact, as I said earlier, that you allowed her to participate with us. She's left her mark. The city is a better place for it, and we are grateful to the family. You're welcome to leave now, and we're going to move on to our regular business, but we will remember her. Thank you, Martha.
I'd just like to say one quick story. The first time Trish ran for council, do you remember the bun feed down at the Wharf Street Debating Club? It was a gentleman's thing. Ladies were not invited or anything. I think she's probably one of the first ladies to go in. And she didn't have a speech. She looked around, she said, "I've seen most of you men naked." So vote for me, and they did.
Thank you. All right. Thank you very much. So, colleagues, we'll move now to item number 3, which is disclosure, pecuniary interest, and general nature thereof. Anything to disclose? Okay. Seeing none, moving on to there is no public meeting today. Reading and confirmation of the minutes of the... Oh, I do have a conflict. Thank you very much, Mr. Beauvais. I have a conflict on the municipal bylaw, 8B7, dealing with municipal bylaw enforcement officers. I have a business at the Quinte Mall, and they'll be appointing bylaw officers, so I will take a conflict on that, and Councillor Thompson will chair that portion of the meeting. There are no public meetings. Reading and confirmation of the minutes of the regular council meeting of November 9th, 2020, and the regular in-camera meeting of November 9th, 2020. Can I get a motion to approve? Moved by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Sandison. All in favor? It's carried. There are no deputations today. Item number 7, correspondence, and we start with 7.1, which is a November 17th letter from Ainley, Graham and Associates, and the resolution is that the November 17th, 2020 letter from Ainley, Graham and Associates Limited regarding request to blast at Riverstone subdivision be received and referred to staff. Can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Councillor Carr, seconded by Councillor Millette. Any discussion? Councillor Carr.
Thank you. Yes, and just briefly, so the Ainley letter says 3 to 4 times per day, but then the CLC construction that's actually going to carry it out has referred to 10 to 15 blasts per day. So there's a little bit of discrepancy, and then also just for the record, the staff to consider, there are folks in the vicinity that are on wells in the area, and I'm very concerned about groundwater moving as the blasting's occurring. Yeah. Thank you.
I'm anticipating that a report will come back to council before any decision is made, so that those are excellent items to raise. Anyone else on this one? So the motion is to receive it and refer to staff. All in favor? It's carried. Item 7.2 is a November 16th, 2020 letter from the Downtown District Business Improvement Association. And the resolution is that the November 16th, 2020 letter from the Downtown District BIA requesting council support for a new BIA initiative to be introduced in 2021 known as Welcoming Streets be received. And we're going to add on there, and that Council for the Corporation of the City of Belleville supports the Downtown District BIA's 2021 Welcoming Street Initiative, allowing the Downtown District BIA to formally request funding for this program through the County of Hastings. And that is moved by Councillor Williams. I need a seconder. Councillor Kelly. Any discussion on this? Councillor Millette.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I'm just briefly going to wholeheartedly support this. I think this is a welcome initiative and something that is a complete reversal almost of what was originally by some unfortunate phraseology, I guess, if you will, on describing the so-called problem downtown. I think we're frank in an open discussion right now on how to best approach this is better than some of the past descriptions of the issues of homelessness and some of the unfortunate use of the term vagrants downtown. But hopefully this is a collaborative effort that will make some progress indeed. Thank you.
Yeah, I would just point out, I think the reversal here is with Hastings County, in which they're going to be stepping up and funding some assistance for this, which has been the challenge. So this is a good initiative, and our congratulations to the BIA for bringing this forward, and we hope that they'll be successful in this. Anyone else? All in favor? It's carried. Thank you. Item number 8, Committee of the Whole. A motion to go into Committee of the Whole to hear and consider reports, passing of recommendations and resolutions with myself and the chair. Moved by Councillor Williams, seconded by Councillor Carr. All in favor, it's carried. 8A, reports. The agenda shall include under reports items that warrant individual attention from council. And we'll start with 8A1, which is the ride-sharing services. It is the Deputy City Clerk's report number DCC 2020-06. The resolution is that pursuant to Deputy City Clerk's report number DCC 2020-06, ride-sharing services, a thorough review and consultation process be undertaken to modernize the city's current taxi licensing bylaw, and that the current taxi licensing bylaw provisions related to ride-sharing services be waived until such a time as the current bylaw is amended or replaced. Moved by Councillor Millette, seconded by Councillor Williams. Discussion, Councillor Millette. You can stay seated, that we're in Committee of the Whole.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I'm going to briefly urge support wholeheartedly for this, and I thank staff and Deputy Clerk Christine Stewart for her diligent work on this. The time has certainly come to move forward on the ride-sharing front. An absolute example this morning happened to me this morning. We had a flight. I was working at the air terminal at CFP Trenton of 62 overseas troops. Our men and women were heading overseas to Kuwait and Iraq. Part of the flight crew was held up for the flight because, you guessed it, they couldn't get from their Belleville hotel to the air terminal at CFP Trenton because they'd been waiting an hour and 20 minutes for a taxi from Belleville. And I said, you know what, if the timing on this isn't now, I don't know what is, because those are the kinds of stories we've been hearing from senior citizens who missed doctor's appointments and medical appointments, guests at hotels who can't catch their trains. The time has come. We've heard from URIDE, Vince Scott, at our October 13th meeting. They're willing to work in every which way, shape, and form with the city in a regulatory fashion. And until that time, I'm going to hope that my colleagues support suspending or waiving the provisions of the current taxi bylaw until this comprehensive report or study is done. And at that time, I would hope that URIDE even has some competition, because it's a time where transit in the city is doing all we can. Taxi services, existing taxi services, despite being left invited to meet the need, is dropping the ball. And then time has come for ride-sharing service, so I would hope I get the support on this. Thank you.
Right. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you, I absolutely wholeheartedly support this proposal. I am in agreement with number 4 that staff have presented to suspend the bylaw, and I guess that, for my interpretation, means that ride sharing would be able to start. The question through you to Mr. McDonald would be, does that mean that we would see URIDE be able to start in ASAP, or is that what's the procedure in which case that would take place?
Mr. McDonald?
Through the chair to Councillor Williams, that is correct. So if council approves the motion as tabled tonight, URIDE or any other ride-sharing service that wants to operate in the city would be permitted to do so. The challenge we had between Deputy Clerk Stewart and the city's legal representation in looking at the taxi bylaw as it's currently written, portions of it apply to ride-sharing services just based on the language that's there. It is older. It needs to be amended or replaced. From our perspective, we've heard council's wishes and the communities to have alternative options. So from our perspective, the most logical route was to propose just suspending those portions that apply to ride-sharing services so that they don't get caught up in the regulatory framework and then are subject to enforcement provisions. That's not our intention. Certainly, we heard and have spoken to a number of them, including URIDE, and the vast majority of them are, as Councillor Millette stated, more than willing to provide all of the things that we would propose in a bylaw. So all the regulatory pieces, provide records of safety for the vehicles, driver records, criminal record, vulnerable sector checks, all of those things, proof of insurance, which will be in the bylaw as we see it in the future, early next year. It's just a matter of timing, and from our perspective, with some of the announcements as stated in the report, and the restriction on some of the services that are generally offered over the holiday season, not running this year for obvious reasons, we thought better to get this before council now than later.
Okay, and in terms of just, services coming in, having insurance, safety checks, if we don't have a bylaw, is that something you're still looking over, or they're just going to be free to do what they please until we have that bylaw in place?
Through the chair to Councillor Williams, as it stands now, they would be free to operate a business. The vast majority of them, as most people are probably aware, are running a business in the province of Ontario. If they aren't registered as a business, that's a whole different problem outside of even the city's regulatory framework under business licensing. We haven't come across that. I'm not so naive to think that there are not services of that nature around. We've run into those in the past. They're not generally coming forward to license themselves anyways, so that's an issue. The ones that are running URIDE, the general ones that you're aware of, ride-sharing, established ride-sharing programs, they're fully cognizant of the risk that they have and liabilities, so they are checking all the boxes that we will have in the business licensing or the regulatory framework when introduced. So that's not a concern. We won't be reviewing any of those in the interim. From our perspective, you are either in the regulatory and licensing game, regardless of what that service is being provided to the residents of the city, or you are not. And at this point, we're asking council to waive the provisions, so stay out of it. And the best comparator that I can think of that this council is probably aware of is the check cashing businesses that we have in the city that were unregulated for an extended period of time, but operating legally under a different framework in the city, federally regulated. From our perspective, ride sharing, I mean, to have a vehicle on the road, you are provincially licensed and regulated, not as a ride sharing, but as a vehicle traveling on the road, which requires licensed drivers, insurance, all of those things. So from our perspective and our legal, this is the best approach at this time.
Okay, thank you. And I like this. I think, I like it for so many reasons. One, that we can trial, so to speak, this program and then have regulations developed later in a bylaw, rather than have regulations and trying to scale them back, which is really harder. The other big part of this I mentioned before, I like that it's the opportunity to create employment and have entrepreneurs start businesses that perhaps can compete with URIDE, but offer those services. There's one in Kelowna called Current Taxi. It was all Teslas, but they use the same kind of technology on the phone for drivers, and they're able to go out and run this service. I think the biggest thing, as we've all mentioned, is the very much need for this right now. Again, coming from the hospitality sector and just knowing every single week, hearing complaints about people waiting for hours. And, the biggest thing that I saw growing up, we all saw growing up, going out and having some drinks at night and having to make that decision, never made it, I knew people that did, whether to walk home or take the chance and get in your car. And that's what we're trying to avoid. And so I think for this city, this is much needed. Thank you for staff for presenting this, and I absolutely support this.
Thank you. Next on the list is Councillor Thompson.
Thank you very much. So if we suspend the rules for, and I support this, just don't take me wrong, if we suspend the rules, are we liable for legal challenge from the taxi companies?
Mr. McDonald?
In any way, shape, or form here?
Through the chair to Councillor Thompson, that was part of the reason that we'd been discussing this at length with the city's legal counsel. Yep. As we've discussed in the past, other jurisdictions that have regulated and licensed ride sharing have been litigating with traditional taxi companies when they've introduced or allowed the introduction of ride sharing. From our perspective, we don't think it puts us in a position to be litigated against. That being said, people can litigate against us at their will. So it certainly doesn't remove 100% of the risk, but it puts us in a good position from our legal counsel's position, simply because there's an acknowledgement that those services are out there, potentially could be operating already. We're acknowledging that they are interested in doing business here. We're reviewing it and intend to put regulation in when they're developed and appropriate. As it is right now, if we don't suspend some of the provisions that would relate to them, any ride-sharing service that was operating in the city of Belleville would be in contravention of some provisions in the taxi bylaw, but certainly based on their business model, couldn't meet all of the provisions of the business or of the taxi bylaw. So we couldn't license them as we do normally. Okay. So they would be running afoul of some, but not all. So they, in effect, couldn't legally run anyway. So this is, from our perspective, a good approach.
Two other questions. With the ride sharing, is there a fee that they would be agreed? Like the taxi companies have a fee. Do the ride sharing have a fee that's comparable to the taxi companies? And second part of that, when they come to our community, and you may have told me already, do they register in this city as a company that's operating? So two questions, fee and do they register?
Through the chair to Councillor Thompson. Ride sharing fees, they do have fees. Generally they're agreed upon between the rider and the driver. Dispatch, in effect, the majority of ride sharing companies are using an app-based service. So you book a ride from point A to B, and before you get in, you know what the fee is going to be. Okay. So it is not the same as getting into a traditional taxi where there is a meter that starts at X, and as you roll, it counts up, and that is the fee-based structure of a taxi. It's not the same as that. It's different, but it is a known cost. So that's a known to the rider. So there's no unknown cost to a rider. The second part of your question was, are they registering locally? They do not have to register with the city, but if they are a company in the province of Ontario, they should be a registered company. If they aren't, then they have other issues that could be a problem for them.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kelly, you're next, and then Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Just first of all, thanks to Christine Stewart, the Deputy City Clerk, for the report. Appreciate that. I just wanted to echo what Councillor Millette touched on about the incident this morning from Belleville to CFA Trenton. Councillor Thompson and Williams and myself received a message from a Patty Preston late last week. Patty's neighbor is 86 years old, walks to the grocery store. It's a kilometer from her home. She's got a grocery cart full, waiting for the taxi. Central doesn't know when they're going to be there to pick her up, so she walks down College Street with her buggy full of groceries and then has to walk back the buggy and then walk home. So an 86-year-old, God bless her, walks 4 kilometers to get her groceries because of the incompetent service that the two taxi companies in town are offering. And this isn't something that came up in the last few months or blame it on COVID. This has been an ongoing theme in the city of Belleville. I'm going to guesstimate over 2 or 3 years we've heard these stories. Just last week I was at the Quinte Mall, saw a young mom and her daughter standing by one of the doors to go in with all their parcels. I said, are you patiently waiting for a taxi? The mother looked at me, who I know. She said, patiently, we've already owned over an hour. So this has to stop. However, I do want to say this, though, with the U-Ride options that have been presented to us. The only thing that I struggle with these types of services, because some in our community aren't that's not their world. They don't live in apps. Apps to them mean they're hungry. They have an appetite. When you're 86 years old, I talked to Patty Preston about her neighbor, and she uses the phone on the wall. So If they're still going to get the service from the taxi companies with the phone on the wall, that's not going to do. But there are folks in our community that aren't app friendly or they don't live in the app world. So we have to find something to make it work for them because they're being left out. And we want an inclusive city where there's that option if they want to use U-Ride, but they're not downloading apps and blah, blah, blah. That's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sandison.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I too want to thank staff for the report that's before us. That said, the wording on the options are a bit of a puzzlement and guide us to option 4. When you're using words like insist is an option, refuse is an option, rush is an option, I mean, you automatically ignore them. So anyway, let me get back to the point. So the point is that there is a need for a regulated ride-sharing program in Belleville, and it would be welcomed. And as I mentioned, the report offers 4. I'd like to offer a 5th, which is take the time to do the thing right. And many of us were at the swearing in of our new police chief, Mike Culhane, last week. And he sort of touched on his guiding principle in life, and I'll paraphrase it. But it was always do the right thing, and certainly ride sharing is the right thing. And the second part was do the thing right. And so for us to introduce ride sharing, we need to do it right. And I don't think that, certainly it's how I feel. I feel that, we're thinking about haphazardly waiving a bylaw. And to me, that's inconsistent with the informed decision-making process that has marked this council's performance during the first half of the year. I think we need to do a deep dive and inform ourselves about the best option or best options. And whether that's through a request for proposal to the various ride-sharing companies that are out there, I think that that's something we should explore. The Financial Services Commission of Ontario indicates that there are a good number of ride-sharing companies in operation. We've got Lyft, we've got Face Drive, Drive Her, just to name a few. And many of these companies are underwritten by Northbridge Insurance Company. So I'm aware that U-Ride made a deputation here to council, but they have not been uniformly accepted across Canada. In British Columbia, U-Ride had their application, which included plans to launch in Kamloops, Kelowna, Nanaimo, and Prince George, turned away by the board, citing a failure to understand safety regulations as a big reason. And I'll just read this in quotes. This is from British Columbia. The board determined that U-Ride's business plan fails to demonstrate a comprehensive understanding of the passenger transportation business in British Columbia generally, excuse me, and of the Passenger Transportation Act and passenger transportation regulation and the requirements under the National Safety Code specifically. Instead, its business plan focuses mainly on the company's profile, marketing strategies, and sales. So read the ruling. And the company was also flagged, and again in quotes, for failing to demonstrate knowledge of the role of the insurance company of British Columbia in the province. So from my view, the players that are in the ride-sharing market are still trying to sort of sort themselves out and shape their identity. A number of them have broadened their scope to include grocery delivery, pharmacy delivery, and some are even doing intercity carpool sharing. So these types of activities, in my mind, more closely resemble a courier service than a taxi service. And it's not clear who's capable of providing the required level of service that we're looking for. Excuse me. So I'd like to ask staff to reach out to local entrepreneurs. I gotta have to drink a drink of water. To see who might be ready to move into this space. Local couriers may see this as a natural extension of their core competency from delivering goods to delivering individuals. So ride sharing is a service that has a lot of potential for our residents and for our community, and we need to do our due diligence to ensure we partner with the right service provider. So as written, I cannot support the recommendation, but if it gets defeated, I would be certainly willing to put a motion on the floor that reads identical to what it reads, except for it says, and that the provision of the current taxi bylaw in as far as they relate to ride sharing be waived. We would change that to not be waived. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Carr or Councillor McCaw? Do you have anything? Okay. So, Councillor Sanderson, I share some of your concerns, and I have a proposal that I think might bridge the gap. You know, the challenge we have right now is that our community is not being served adequately with transportation services. And so, in particular, with the fact that Operation Red Nose will not be conducting their services this year because of COVID in the month of December, it really puts us in a situation where, as Councillor Williams talked about, it makes people have a very, very poor choice. In addition, we know that there is some inadequacies in terms of level of service. So regardless of I'm not sure about British Columbia's regulations, but I know that in Ontario, there are other municipalities where U-Ride operates. I also know that there are a number of other options, as you mentioned, including Uber and Lyft and some of those other options. But the concern I have is allowing anyone to operate in our municipality without any control over it. So we have to do a review of the bylaw. It hasn't been updated since 2010. I don't even recall if there was a ride-sharing services. Uber didn't even exist in 2010 when it came up. So a lot has changed. And I agree with you. We don't want to rush the review. We want to do it adequately. But at the same time, we have to allow for some provision of ride-sharing services. So my suggestion, if Councillor Millette and Williams are in agreement, that they would amend their resolution to add another paragraph that would say, and that any ride-sharing service operating in the city of Belleville be required to register and be approved by the city clerk during this review period. And then that would require them to come in and have some type of a checklist that the clerk would determine. For example, do they have adequate insurance? Do they have some type of an electronic process that is fair and transparent? And there's a provision to respond to customer complaints if they're received. That doesn't mean that we're going to give them it permanently. It means that we're going to allow them to operate in our market until we have the time to go through and do a full review of the taxi bylaw in light of ride-sharing services and many of the things you spoke about, including courier companies or whatnot. So I'm seeing a nod from you, Councillor Millette and Williams, if that's okay with you. We would just have that motion be amended, and that will be the one that we would consider. So it has what we've had there, and I'll just repeat it, and that any ride-sharing service operating in the city of Belleville be required to register and be approved by the city clerk during this review period. Mr. McDonald, is that okay in terms of the sounding? And I'll get you the wording. I know it's a responsibility that's on you now to deal with the ride-sharing companies, but it's not all the companies because obviously taxis are required to be approved by the Belleville Police Service. So, but it would allow you to be able to deal with it in this short period of time.
To the mayor and to the point in particular, certainly we can do that. The caveat is, I think in conversation with city solicitor, as I stated before, the challenge with business licensing and regulation, you are either in it or you are out of it. By having them register, you are partway in, which opens you up to the challenge of being a regulator, and that opens us up to litigation to an extent. Yeah. I'm not saying anybody will. The other piece of this is we can encourage them to register with the city clerk. There would be no penalty at this point. it would be a voluntary registration, which again is fine, and we can put provisions in application in for licensing and insurance and all of the rest of it. And I'm okay with that. So I think this is fine. But to Councillor Sanderson, just for a point of clarification, I think as written, certainly it doesn't put us in business with any provider. It simply is opening Belleville to the market, because as a provider of ride-sharing service, if I called the city clerk's office or the city and asked if there is licensing requirements, or are you open right now for business for ride-sharing, our answer is no. If the motion as written had passed, or the amended motion now, our answer is yes, and here is the requirement to register at the clerk's office. Prior to that, it would be yes, and regulations are being developed for regulation and licensing enforcement of the business. You ride, Lyft, Uber, all of them. So it doesn't mean that we're partnering with anybody. It's simply the same as anything. Our licensing bylaw is for the safety, public health, for anything that is food, potential fire, building, all of those. That's the schedules and licensing bylaw. It doesn't mean that we are partnering with any one provider. It simply means the licensing and regulation of the service potentially being provided by any service provider is now regulated by the city. Currently, because of the provisions in the taxi licensing bylaw, was no consideration given for ride sharing at the time it was written, precludes them from doing it legally. Just some of the odd language fits their business, and others don't permit it because they don't check all the boxes. So just to clarify that, but certainly as amended, we can do it. We'll develop an amended application that has them check boxes, register with us. Again, I can share with you, I'm under no illusion that there are not people running the streets of Belleville providing this type of service. And to Councillor Kelly's, just for clarification, some of the ride-sharing programs are app-based. The majority of them offer a landline telephone way to book a ride. So there is options on the vast majority of them.
Okay, well, thank you very much. So then I think, my suggestion is anybody that wants to ride a long-term ride-sharing service in the city of Belleville, that they should register with the clerk in this interim period, because it will be something that we will consider afterwards. And if people are not complying with our rules and regulations during this interim period, it gives me very little confidence that they will follow them afterwards. So, Councillor Millette and then Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you to all the councillors who commented. And in particular, I just wanted to address the. I was aware that U-Ride had in fact been denied in Prince George and other cities. We have to remember they were aligned against 45 other taxi companies who had opposed them, and the BC Federation of Labour, not the least of the opponents to this. My kid brother does business in the province of British Columbia, and he said he has never seen a more Byzantine system of regulations than the Insurance Corporation of British Columbia. So it's not surprising that they would lose there. I just want to say this is our best solution for a responsible company that has expressed interest to fill a real need in our community. As it is now, you can jump into the back of a dial-a-bottle truck with a case of beer and a bucket of fried chicken and get to Rossmore, and you take your chances. This group is responsible. They have insurance. They're looking after, they're doing business in similar sized cities across Ontario. I say we need them here. Anybody I've spoken to, and this morning's example at the airbase was just one more nail in the coffin for the poor service that we're getting from our existing taxi service. So I don't believe we can wait any longer. I'm very much appreciative of the work we've done so far on this file, and I look forward to seeing the festive season and having a few more options on the road. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Williams?
Thank you, and just to add on to that, I think, when we started, I know hearing about this from constituents a little while ago, I know that Rob Mason was one gentleman who was doing a change.org petition, and they were looking at Uber at that time. And Uber and it's just to clear the air of who can come and who is coming, they would not even look at Belleville. And I think at the time people were asking, can you download the app? Because the more people that download the Uber app, that Uber might pay attention to us. But as funny as it seems, these companies are not scrambling and trying to come to these cities, to Belleville specifically. It's nice to see that U-Ride's here. I guess you could say in one instance, we've been waiting almost as long for ride shares. Some people wait for cabs in this town. Maybe not quite as long. But I think we have a company, and that's great. Competition and entrepreneurship will allow others to come up. And just like Councillor Sanderson said, we would hope to see other companies start. I know that there was one gentleman in town that started a similar company that had the ability through an app and otherwise to do it. But it is a big investment, and people have to do it. But let's hope that we see that happen. So I think for that, it is the time. We have the company. Let's start it, and who knows down the road if Lyft or another thing, or Garney Transport or something else comes up, and we have some more than one or two. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we have the amended motion on the floor. All those in favor? It's carried. Thank you. 8A2, Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program. This is the ICIP program for Public Transit Funding Stream, and it is the Accounting Coordinator's Report number AC 2020-05. The resolution is that a bylaw to approve and authorize a transfer payment agreement dated November 23, 2020, between Her Majesty the Queen and Right of the Province of Ontario, represented by the Minister of Transportation and the City of Belleville, related to funding provided by the Province of Ontario to the municipality under the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program Public Transit Funding Stream, as referenced in the Accounting Coordinator's Report number AC 2020-05, be prepared for Council's consideration, and that the 2020 capital budget be amended to add $2,419,800 of additional funding for the Northeast Industrial Park Active Transportation and Transit Shelters Project, with funding coming from the Public Transit Funding Stream grant. Moved by Councillor Sanderson, seconded by Councillor Carr. Discussion or questions? All right, just so for the benefit of the public watching, more good news. We were successful in our application. We'd like to thank our federal members of parliament and our provincial members of provincial parliament for supporting the City of Belleville in this way. All in favor? It's carried. Thank you. We'll move now to consent items, where Council may adopt consent items by one motion, but prior to consideration of such motion, members may request that specific items be removed from consideration under such motion, and Council shall consider such items individually. So 8B7 needs to be pulled because I have a conflict on it. I'll start with Councillor Carr.
No, thank you.
Councillor Sanderson.
8B1.
All right. Councillor Millette. No, thank you. Councillor Williams.
No, thank you.
Councillor McCaw. No, thank you. Councillor Thompson.
8B5.
Councillor Kelly.
No, thank you.
All right. So I need a motion that the following agenda items be approved with the exceptions of 8B1, 8B5, and 8B7. Moved by Councillor Kelly, seconded by Councillor Sanderson. All in favor? It's carried. Councillor Thompson, can you take 8B7 first, and then I'll thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. 8B7, Municipal Bylaw Enforcement Officer, request for Quinte Mall, Belleville, resolution that a bylaw appointing municipal bylaw enforcement officer for Quinte Mall property at 390 North Front Street be prepared for Council's consideration. Need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Sanderson, Councillor McCaw. Any questions? Not? All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. 8B1 is the execution of a pre-servicing agreement for the Riverstone subdivision, Phase 1, part of lots 8 and 9, registered plan number 124, and part of lot 8, concession 3, former township of Thurlow, now the City of Belleville. The owner is GCL Developments, and the files are ER-103/12T-19003. And it is the development engineering the Development Engineer in Training, report number APS 2020-49. The resolution is that a bylaw to approve and authorize the execution of a pre-servicing agreement between GCL Developments Limited and the Corporation of the City of Belleville be prepared for Council's consideration, but that the respective agreement and related documentation not be signed until such time as the Manager of Approvals advises that the owners have satisfied all city requirements. Moved by Councillor Sandison, seconded by Councillor Carr. Councillor Sandison, you had raised this item.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Director of Engineering. So the first thing I'd like to do is thank staff for the report, particularly on page 2 of the report, third paragraph from the bottom. It reads that the pre-servicing agreement will also have additional requirements, including provisions for street cleaning on a weekly basis to be completed by the developer. And for those that may not be aware, in Sittler's Ridge, specifically around Covington Crescent and the entrance at Hartford Drive, it's basically come to be referred to in the subdivision as the dirty 30s. It more resembles a dust bowl at any given time, and I know that staff have worked tirelessly with a developer to get that area swept on some sort of a regular basis. So the fact that we've got it in there for a weekly basis is good news. My question is, I don't see a tree canopy in there, and I don't see designated parkland to be completed as part of the project. I just wondered if it's an omission or whether it's covered somewhere else.
Mr. Ashton, how are you? Did you hear the question?
Tree canopy, so basically there are some outstanding conditions, and one of them is that for the subdivision agreement that they need to plant street trees on local roads, either within the road allowance or on private blocks to the satisfaction of the City of Belleville, so that's still outstanding. Okay. So that's a matter to be outstanding. And then, sorry, the parkland. Yeah. So there is parkland blocks that are proposed in that subdivision. In terms of the phasing of it, it'll be done. It will be done, but there is parkland as part of that project, yes.
Okay, so what I was going to say while you were looking at it, so currently what we have is we have developments or subdivisions that are built up and parklands identified, and then the parkland sits empty for 10 years or so, and then council tries to wrestle around the table in terms of capital budget to get something done in terms of playgrounds and trees and picnic benches and everything else that goes with it. So I just wondered, in this new subdivision, are we contemplating having the park built, if you will, in one of the early phases so that we're not left with a similar problem that we're dealing with today?
So I believe the park, I'd have to double check, but the printout of this isn't very good. But I believe that the park comes in a future phase. The parkland portion of this comes in a future phase. So the one thing too with the parks master plan, key integral part of it is to look at policies with regards to bringing on new parkland in subdivisions as well. So a lot of sort of community, I guess, expectations and values will be reflected as we move forward with future subdivisions to give us a better direction and respond to what the community wants.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Ashton, while you're there, and forgive me for not knowing this detail, is the space for this green space or this future parkland, is it in the area that comprises the first phase, or is it going to be in the area that will be in the second or third phase?
I believe it's in the future phase.
I think this phase is more in the middle phase with more of the housing, yeah.
So, you know, I think we've seen this over the last number of years, and you know, you have done, Director Ashton, you have done an amazing job with so many different things. You are proceeding with the housing community improvement plan. You are doing a new official plan for the city. You are doing boundary changes. You're doing a lot of work, and we're certainly not expressing any dissatisfaction with you and what you've accomplished. What we're frustrated about is that, you know, we're now waiting for the Parks and Recreation Master Plan to be completed to then bring in a policy which, you know, developers should see the benefit of creating this park space in the initial phase of their developments because it will help to market their developments in the future. And what ends up happening is it gets kicked down the road, and as Councillor Sanderson said, you know, in 10 years from now, we end up having space that, or longer in some cases, that we say that would have been a great place for a lot of the neighborhood who had children 10 or 15 years ago. Now we're getting ready for their grandchildren to come and visit them because their kids have grown up and left the house. So I think it's, you know, again, this council has been very clear about our desire to improve outdoor amenities throughout the city. And as we look at new developments coming forward, and I know this one is up to your approval before it moves forward, these are the kinds of things we'd like to see staff suggest, is that in the first phase, these things should not be forgotten about.
Yeah, and excuse me, I'm just sort of going off the photocopies here of the council agenda, so I don't want to say that there is or isn't included, because I'm having a hard time reading the details as I'm standing here. So.
But I think you've heard the message. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Carr has a question.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, when I look back at Deerfield subdivision as a prime example, they built the whole subdivision and promised a playground. Nothing came. Then it was, if you fundraise, we'll match. That never came. And then council had to come in and put something in. The other thing is, and I've seen it with Settlers, and we wrestled that one last term, when a development is occurring and young families are moving in, kids invariably are looking for places to play, and it's not always their backyard. And without a playground, what was happening was kids were on the street in Settlers Ridge as construction was occurring. And so by having a playground and a place to go to, gets them off the street, if you will, while construction's occurring. And also, you know, and I agree with my colleagues, and thank you for Councillor Sanderson for bringing that forward. The fact of the matter is that it gets kicked down the road. And by the time it does come, as the mayor rightfully points out, those families have moved on. And when we put the playground in at Deerfield, that would have been good a decade ago. And so I think it's something that we really need to look hard at. And the other thing too, and I haven't been up there lately while I'm thinking of it, and I know this doesn't go right to the river's edge, but I hope that there's been some salvaging of some trees along that borderline, simply because across the river is Signal Brewery. And when they're having outdoor events and things of that nature, if the development is coming in and clear cutting for the sake of convenience while they're building is great, but for the folks that are moving in there, they're now going to inherit less of a natural buffer. And you know, I was at Signal not too long ago, meeting with the owner there, and we were talking just about that, the fact that there is some natural buffer there now on river's edge, and I would hope that staff would continue to monitor, and I know we don't own all that there, but salvage as much tree canopy as we can for the purpose of sound buffering from across the river. Thank you.
And ED, or Engineering Development Services, do hear your questions and concerns about parkland development, and that's why we were actively involved in the Parks Master Plan, so that we can have some definitive policies going forward as well.
All right, anyone else? Thank you, Director Ashton. Thank you, my colleagues. All in favor? It's carried. 8B5, the Facade Improvement Program proposed grant allocation for 249 to 253 Front Street, City of Belleville. The owner applicant is Bruce and Dawn Firestone. It is the Principal Planner's Report Number PP 2020-57, and the resolution is that the grant allocation for 249 to 253 Front Street, recommended by the Facade Improvement Committee as set out in Report PP 2020-57, Facade Improvement Program, proposed grant allocation for 249253 Front Street, Belleville, Ontario be approved, subject to all the requirements of the facade program guideline, and that the project be completed within 2 years of council approval, and that the mayor and city clerk be authorized to sign the commitment agreement with the grant recipient on behalf of the corporation of the city of Belleville, and that the city clerk be authorized to affix the corporate seal. Moved by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Kelly. Councillor Thompson, you had asked for this one be
Yes, I
identified.
thank you very much. And not only this one, I'd like to bring attention to the other two that we passed already, but this one in particular, this is a new people that come into Belleville from Ottawa, purchased a building that's been sitting idle now for a number of years and in great need of repairs. And lo and behold, they come in, they get the facade program, and they're getting $16,250 to it. That shows the importance for the facade program in our community, because just tonight we're going to pass $40,000, $225,000 in 3 facade programs, and which will leave us about $29,775 left. And we got another meeting this week for another application. So, and the one we just approved here, or approving now, and the one before that was TJ Variety. We know how long that building's been sitting empty and in derelict situation, and now they're finally coming forward and to upgrade the buildings. And if you look through downtown Belleville, it's pretty inspiring to see the number of buildings that are being facade used, or using money from our facade program to upgrade our buildings. It's told a lot about our city, and I certainly appreciate the council staying in supporting this program, because here we got a new people coming to Belleville asking for their money. We got 2 other applications, and I tended to add it up, but I know next council meeting I hope to have a total for the year of this year for what we spent. It's a great program, and I ask for your support just in highlighting the 3 that we're approving tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on this? Right, and and it's great news, the community improvement plan, which we hope to be finalizing at the next meeting on December the 14th, it includes this facade improvement program moving forward. So that is indeed good news. And it's a good investment where we partner with these businesses, and certainly we don't pay the majority of the funds for it. So,
and that's a good point, Your Worship, that we're not only putting money in it, but they're also putting money in it. Thank you very much for clarifying.
All those in favor? It's carried. 8C, Council Information Matters. Again, Council may adopt consent items by one motion, but prior to consideration of such motion, members may request that specific items be removed from consideration under such motion, and Council shall consider such items individually. Councillor Williams.
No, thank you.
Councillor McCaw. Councillor Thompson.
No, thank you.
Councillor Kelly.
No, thank you.
Councillor Millette. Councillor Sandison.
No, thank you.
And Councillor Carr.
Oh, thank you.
All right, so then the following items be received. Moved by Councillor Carr, seconded by Councillor Millette. All in favor? It's carried. A motion to rise and report. Moved by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Sandison. All in favor? It's carried. Councillor Thompson, can I ask you to do first, second, and third readings of bylaw number 2020-220, please?
Thank you very much. Through bylaws number 2020-220, a bylaw to appoint municipal bylaw enforcement officer for the purpose of enforcement bylaw number 9457, part 111, section 3, parking vehicles on private property, and section 6 of the handicap parking zones, bylaw number 12967, as they affect the areas of land and premises known as Quinny Mall, 390 North Front Street, 100 Bell Boulevard, and 190 Bell Boulevard. We move it or second for that. Councillor Sean Kelly, Councillor Williams. Any, all in favor? Second reading of bylaw number 2020-220. Can I have a mover and a seconder for that? Councillor Carr, Councillor Millette. Any questions on that particular motion? All in favor? Carried. And third reading of bylaw number 2020-220. Again, bylaw number to appoint a municipal bylaw enforcement officer for the purpose of enforcing bylaw number 9457 and part 111, section 3, parking of vehicles on private property, and Section 6 in the handicap parking zones for bylaw number 12967 as they affect the areas of land and premises known as Quinny Mall, 390 North Front Street, and 100 Bell Boulevard, and 190 Bell Boulevard. Mover and seconder, Councillor Sanderson. Councillor McCaw. Any questions? All in favor? Carried.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. So, first reading of bylaws number 2020-214, if I'm able just to read the numbers. 215, 216, 217, 218, 219, 221, 222, and 223. Moved by Councillor Sanderson, seconded by Councillor Kelly. All in favor? It's carried. Second reading of bylaws 2020-214, 215, 216, 217, 218, 219, 221, 222, and 223. Moved by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Kelly. Any discussion? Councillor Thompson.
On bylaw number 2020-189, a bylaw to amend the parking on Hastings Drive and McDonald. I know we did first reading. Did we get any replies back from the neighbors on that particular bylaw?
Yes, I see it there. I don't know. I'll ask Mr. McDonald.
Through the chair to Councillor Thompson, we did not.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anyone else for any of those? All in favor? It's carried. And then third and final reading of bylaws number 2020-189, 214, 215, 216, 217, 218, 219, 221, 222, and 223. Moved by Councillor McCaw, seconded by Councillor Sanderson. All in favor? It's carried. New business. So we do unfortunately have a motion that we're required to deal with right now. It's moved by Councillor McCaw, seconded by Councillor Kelly, that pursuant to Section 262 of the Municipal Act, 2001, Council for the Corporation of the City of Belleville hereby declares the Ward 1 seat formerly held by Councillor Patricia Culhane to be vacant, effective this 23rd day of November 2020. Motion is being duly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? It's carried. Thank you, colleagues. Anyone else have any new business? Councillor McCaw.
Thank you. Quite some time ago, Councillor Culhane had informally made a request to then Chief Gignac. She was looking for some information in relation to the vagrancy statistics and police interactions over the last 18 months. So when I was at our police service board meeting, I did have a discussion, and I think it's probably more appropriate that I make a formal request and have to see if Chair Miller could bring forward to me in form of a report information in relation to the vagrancy statistics, police interactions over the last 18 months.
So you're asking the city to request the police service board for that report?
Formally, and I think they're available. I think in the past, it was quite some time ago, Councillor Culhane had asked for it, but more informally. So in order to release that, it needs to be more of a formal process.
Yes, yeah. So, no, that's consistent with the fact that they are a statutory board that is separate from the city. Mr. McDonald has that information. Okay, thank you, Councillor McCaw. Anyone else for new business? Councillor Millette.
Thank you, Your Worship. At the November 9th meeting,
yes,
as you recall, we passed without discussion a number of items. Most significantly was the hiring without discussion of Mr. Swayze as our Integrity Commissioner. And I briefly, I have a couple of questions on that. And he was the only.
Yes, and because we. The unusual circumstances, I will allow us to reconsider this item, which I agreed to with you last time. So yes, and we were expecting that. So Mr. McDonald will be able to answer any questions you have. So go ahead.
Okay. All right. Thanks very much. Briefly to Mr. McDonald, Mr. Swayze was the only bidder for the opening. Were there any others that took out packages, or as we would in a tender or an RFP, that sort of thing?
Through the chair to Councillor Millette, you're correct. Yes, Mr. Swayze, who was our acting Integrity Commissioner, was the only person who put a formal proposal in response to the RFP. Without the report in front of me, yes, purchasing reported, I would say between 7 and 9 people took packages. We think one was taken out by a construction company inadvertently.
That might not be just so ironic.
The name was completely didn't seem appropriate, and they didn't start. Didn't start the process. So no, but there was a little bit of interest, obviously, in the package. But yeah, one proposal submitted.
Okay. My other question is, how did Mr. Swayze come about as our interim IC?
Through the chair to Councillor Millett for all of Council's information. So upon termination of our previous integrity commissioner, obviously to be on the right side of the legislation, meaning that we had an integrity commissioner who at the time was also our acting closed meeting investigator. Immediately after that meeting, I reached out to the Ombudsman's office to advise them that we were without a closed meeting investigator. They're now our closed meeting investigator. Talked to purchasing in the morning and let them know that we would be revamping the RFP that was just short of 2 years old for the integrity commissioner and issuing that again. And then reached out to Prince Edward County and Hastings County, who were using different firms than Cunningham Swan. Quinte West used Cunningham Swan, so obviously we're looking for someone else to act in the interim as ours. The legislation says that a integrity commissioner a municipality can use the services of a neighboring municipality's integrity commissioner. In effect, all it means is that you can have an interim one while you're searching for a permanent one. So I reached out to both communities for contact information, contacted both parties, asked if either were interested. They both were. Believe it or not, I went with Mr. Swayze because he was the first one to get back to me. And in light of the fact that we were without, I wanted to have one in place in the event that we had a complaint.
Okay. And Mr. Swayze, I think I read his billing, his hourly billables are just about similar to Mr. Fleming's, or if not close or identical?
Through the mayor to Councillor Millett, I think they're a little bit more, but they're in the ballpark of what was being billed on an hourly rate. And in comparison to the original submission, the bids that were in response to the original RFP, still competitive with that. And Mr. Swayze was a respondent to the original RFP as well.
And that dollar figure is, do you recall offhand?
I don't know right off the top of my head.
200?
It's in that, yeah.
240 in that range?
Might be a little bit higher than that, but yeah.
280? I think it's 280.
Yeah.
I have 280 written down.
I think you're right.
Okay, and so finally, in the end, we had one, Mr. Swayze, who represents, I believe, 40 other municipalities in Ontario?
Through the chair to Councillor Millett, yes, that number has fluctuated. He has dropped a couple and gained a couple. Nature of the business, he was busier than he wanted to be originally, but has gained a number of clients as that office and that role has matured in the very short time that it's been in existence at the municipal level. Municipalities such as Belleville, there has been significant change in offices and in representatives throughout the province. So he has picked up clients.
Okay, yeah, I saw one, Elliott Lake, that's crazy up there, between Tony Fleming and Mr. Swayze. They seem to be switching back and forth. Elliott Lake fired Tony Fleming and hired Swayze, but that was a rehiring. So, as you say, they do fluctuate. So, okay, thank you. I don't have any further questions.
Thank you. New business, Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, just a question on that, if I may.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Swayze, with us hiring him, has he been dismissed by any other municipality during the section?
I don't know, and I don't know how we would be expected to.
Okay, just a question.
You know, if you wanted to contact him and ask him, I would encourage you to do that.
Okay. The second question, will he be invited here to the podium to give a presentation in the future?
He may be. I know that Mr. McDonald sent out an email with a link to a podcast where Mr. Swayze was interviewed, and I listened to it. It was quite, quite good, quite informative, and it talked about his philosophy in dealing with those, and I think that's very useful for councillors. Under our current bylaw for the Integrity Commission, where we established that position, if you have questions about what is appropriate, how the Code of Conduct applies, if you have any questions about pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, he's available for you to contact. And members of the public, if they have any concerns or any complaints, there's a process they can follow now.
Okay, thank you.
All right, new business. Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to motions. Sorry, Councillor Sanderson, under new business.
Sorry, Your Worship, I was a little slow getting my hand up. Just one item under new business. So Council should now be in receipt of the 2021 draft capital budget, and we will be having the budget setting session on December 1st at a special meeting of Council. The only comment that I would make about the budget is that the capital budget was constructed such that there would be no tax increase on residents. However, as we've previously discussed around the chamber, there is going to be a significant investment in water and wastewater, and that will translate into substantially increased water rates. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sanderson. If I just may, I've always been concerned about the public not necessarily being as knowledgeable as we are about the fact that we have a capital portion of our budget and then we have an operating budget, and we do them at different times. And so when they hear things like there will be no tax increase because of the capital budget in December, they think, oh great, that means the 2020 budget will be passed without a tax increase. And then when we deal with the operating side of it in April, like we do, and we have all the pressures that we deal with, they then say, well, you said there wasn't going to be a tax increase. So, if I can just clarify, if you allow me to, what we're doing is that we will not need any additional tax revenue from property taxes to cover the capital investment. It'll be the same as the previous year. So there's no new increase on there. We don't know what the operating side is, and the operating side will deal with all of our people and our program delivery side of it. And so last year we were very fortunate. We had a slightly negative overall tax increase, which was a combination of both those budgets. So I don't want the media to be reporting on the fact that council is going to be considering a flat budget next year, but certainly we always work towards that. So, okay. Under new business, Councillor Thompson, again for new business.
Yeah, just to further on the statement about the sewer and water rates being increased. When we do our capital, I'm going to put a motion that we try to clarify to the public why we have to increase the sewer and water rates, because there is that concern. So I'll deal with that when we do the budget.
Yeah, well, I think you can probably put your motion in line behind the development charge potential increase and all the other costs that are running predominantly because of water and wastewater, right?
Yep.
So, all right. If I'll move on now, any motions? There are no motions before us. Any notice of motions? Announcements. Anyone have any announcements? I know we have a number, so let's start on my left with Councillor Sanderson and we'll work our way around the table.
Thank you, Your Worship. Last Friday, on behalf of the Mayor, I was pleased to present certificates of appreciation during a medical emergency to 4 of our transit employees. And it stemmed from on September the 4th, we had a bus driver that went into cardiac arrest at 400 Coleman Street. And so there were 4 employees that went beyond the call of duty. They used their first aid skills, stayed calm, and ensured that Richard Ralph, got the medical attention he needed. The driver is currently on the mend, and his wife, Chrissy, and their daughter joined in the event last Friday. as I presented to Boyd McDonald, Brad Strauss, and Andrew McGrath. There was also one there for Tony Hunter, but he wasn't available as he was on the off shift. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, announcements. Councillor Carr?
Yes, thank you. Just two, and I know that some of us were at the Santa Claus drive-by, and I sent a note to General Manager Reed just thanking the transportation operations staff for setting up the float and tearing down. You know, it's lousy weather. Council members, we show up and we do our thing and leave, and staff in the background do a lot of work to put that together. So just thank you to them. Also, and because we're getting close to a capital budget or any kind of budget, I'll be hosting a virtual town hall meeting this Thursday, joined by Councillor Sanderson at 7 o'clock on Zoom. And if anybody wants to participate or just view the meeting, email me, councillor.carr@belleville.ca, and the registration will go out. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Millette.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I have, quickly, I have a pretty exciting announcement to make regarding some historic front pages that have been copied. They were copied many years ago and framed and graced the halls of the Intelligencer building when it was actually a newspaper building. And so there are about a dozen of these, and they have everything from historic floods in Belleville to famous murders and all kinds of things. So anyway, we have a dozen of these historic front pages that I've managed to convince the current management of the Intel to donate to the city of Belleville, so we can hang some around City Hall. I think in the coming weeks, we'll once we get them here, we'll maybe talk to staff, see what we might keep around in City Hall. Certainly the rest can go to the library, various places, or other city buildings and rotate around other city buildings. But just a little bit of, and handsomely, sturdily framed bits of Belleville history. So, and this one, as we were noting earlier, the Max won the Allen Cup, which is, of course, the senior hockey championships for Canada. Europe next, need $50,000. Mayor Hyde opens drive to raise some. Well, if anybody knows their Belleville history, they'll know where some of that money came from. But yeah, just it's pretty cool stuff, and there's more of them, and it's always fun to browse through history. But yeah, these have been donated graciously by the Intelligencer management, and I look forward to maybe hanging one or two around here.
Thank you very much, Councillor Millette, and thank you for your involvement in getting this for the city. We will gladly appreciate them. So the Max in that year for the Allen Cup, they beat Kelowna, correct? Right. Yeah, so interestingly enough, there is a memorial arena in the city of Kelowna. I was there in 2013 for a Chamber of Commerce conference, and their memorial arena is on Ellis Street, which at the time Mayor Ellis was here in Belleville. So I found that to be interesting, and we were in the throes of what we should do. But as Councillor Millette referred to, Mayor Hyde at that time, they had to come up with some money, and that was when they did a second tax call. So, you know, we do installments, we set our tax rate one time, and then we do a tax. They did a supplemental tax call, and the elections back then were every year, and not a single member of that council was returned. So every time I talk to Mr. Melnick about the Belleville Senators, I always keep that in mind of whatever the discussion is. Thank you very much for that. It's very generous, and please thank the folks from the Intel. New business, or sorry, announcements? Okay, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you very much. I got two announcements. First of all, I attended the virtual meeting of the National Housing Day last Thursday, put on by Hastings County. Very informative. They had some guest speakers, and it was run from 10 o'clock till 12 o'clock, and Hastings County was on it with some other people speaking about the good home, recovery from all, pathways to home ownership, Belleville Affordable Housing Community Improvement Plan, and Pocket Community Rapid Housing Initiative, and then closing remarks by Warden Rick Phillips. So very informative 2-hour thing. I made some further notes. The second item, I want to congratulate the Chamber of Commerce for organizing a wonderful parade, and I know you're going to speak about it later, Annie. But with all the success, we always get a few concerns, and it was an overly great success. And I commend all the councillors and everybody that was out preparing it. Got a little wet, but we all got warm after. Maybe some took a little longer than others, but it was a great evening. The other thing I have to announce is from the Accessibility Committee, which is chaired by myself. Brian Cornier's carrier is on it, David Globe, Karen Kitchen, Patrick Russell, Councillor Sean Kelly, and staff resource Sarah Collins. At our October Accessible Advisory Committee meeting, we discussed how clearing snow can be a barrier for many people, such as older adults, people with disability, some with an injury, and even a parent with young children in the house. It can affect individuals' ability to stay active in our community and to live at home safely as an independent as possible. City staff have received calls from residents inquiring about snow removal assistance program. After some research, only one such program was found, and it was exclusive to members of service agencies, and then there was wait list for among their clients. After connecting with other communities on the subject, we learned about the Snow Angels Canada. Snow Angels is a community-based initiative that matches volunteers with people in the area who need help to shovel snow from their driveways and walkways. It started in 2015 after a group of residents from London, Ontario recognized the need for it all in their community. In 2018, the Snow Angels group partnered with a couple Ontario municipalities and received a government grant to formalize and expand the program. It is now known as the Snow Angels Canada, and the website platform is available free to be used by any community across the country who wish to join. The Accessibility Advisory Committee believes it is a great opportunity to satisfy a need in our community while promoting volunteerism, community spirit, and connecting among residents. It is not a city-run program, and there is no major cost. It relies completely on volunteers and for people to register themselves. Our role is to promote the initiative, make residents aware of it, and encourage volunteering. First news about the Snow Angels was included in our October edition of the Belleville Update newsletter and the October 50 Plus Center newsletter. Later this week, we will also be promoting the initiative through a media release in our social media outlet and our website with a poster around community facilities. To encourage people to get involved and recognize the work of the generous volunteers or Snow Angels in our community, the CAO's office has kindly donated some awesome City of Belleville swags to be won. Thank you. And volunteers can be nominated by the person they are helping and will be entered into a draw to win the City of Belleville toques and sweaters. To submit a request for help to volunteers as a Snow Angel, you need to register on snowangelscanada.ca. Personal information is kept private until a match has been made and agreed to, at which time, obviously, an address must be shared. We want to remind residents that Snow Angels is not a city-run program, and we do not have the administration control. However, if there's any questions, residents can contact the City Accessibility Coordinator for more information, and we're also possibly going to have somebody sponsor vests for the volunteers and be able to supply those, but that hasn't been confirmed yet. With the Accessibility Committee and Councillor Sean Kelly, if you'd like to speak about it, it's a great initiative. It opened up an avenue for us to our community to help so many people, and again, it's not a city-run program. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Kelly, did you have an announcement you want to make?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, that's Snow Angels. We heard the information a few weeks ago at the Accessibility Committee meeting. It is a great program, so sign up, and you can help a senior with snow removal, and I know folks like Mr. Thompson would appreciate that.
Yes. Thank you very much.
A couple of announcements I have. Just Festival of Trees last week. We had our opening night on Thursday. Councillor Millett, Councillor McCaw, myself are on the committee. And thanks to Annis Ross and her team and Sheila Alexander and all the city staff that were involved in that. Amazing. And people are enjoying the Festival of Lights this year. 3 different spots. It's lightened up the city. And also the partnership we have with the downtown looks great. So we encourage everybody in Belleville to take some time, take a tour around the city. You'll love it. Also, too, wanted to get in. The Santa Claus Parade last night was wonderful. Congrats to the Chamber and all the different partners that were involved with creating a float and dealing with the elements last night. Mother Nature was delivering, but it was a fun night. And I know it was frustrating, but it's all about the kids, and we're less than 30 sleeps away, I think, from Santa's visit. And finally, I just want to get this in. The Inclusion Committee has its second meeting tomorrow, and we're meeting at the Community Hub at the new Belleville Police Station. Inspector Barry is going to have our meeting there. He's invited us to check out the police station, and Councillor Kelly McCaw was telling me earlier tonight you were at a meeting there recently, and what a nice spot to get together, and this is a new community hub at the police station. So that's what I have for you, Mayor.
Thank you very much. All right. You know, the last week has been a little unnerving, I think, for all of us in the province of Ontario as we've seen COVID-19 numbers increase. And we saw at midnight today the regions of Toronto and Peel go back into the gray zone, which is a full lockdown, and other communities going into the red zone. I'd like to announce further restrictions on the use of our facilities, in particular the Quinte Sports and Wellness Centre. We are we're limiting now anyone using the facility to only be residents of green and yellow zones. So folks in orange, red, and gray zones will not be permitted to rent the ice surface or use the facility. And that means participants, visitors, coaches, and team personnel residing in an orange restrict or a red control or a gray lockdown zone shall not be permitted to use any recreation, culture, and community services facility in the City of Belleville. This includes recreation and cultural activities, rentals, and City of Belleville activities, including events, meetings, interviews, training at the Quinte Sports and Wellness Centre, Glanmore National Historic Site, Parkdale Community Centre, and the Community Archives. And I would recommend this also for the Belleville Library Board to consider that for using it. Last week, Dr. Oglaza was very clear in suggesting that we do not want people traveling from orange, red, and gray zones to our community. And he is investigating at the request of our area mayors additional policies that can be done to discourage that travel. So obviously essential travel, medical, those types of things are required. But the best thing that we can do now is to limit our interaction between health units, regions in Ontario as much as possible. On November the 13th, we had the pleasure of swearing in the City of Belleville's new police chief, Chief Mike Culhane. Chief Culhane came to Belleville with a decorated resume and a great deal of experience. He is the right choice for Belleville, and I and my colleagues on council are looking forward to working closely with him. Once again, congratulations to Chief Culhane. Also, congratulations and a thank you for the retirement and the move to perhaps a little less active and stressful position for Fire Chief Mark McDonald. He has served as 8 years as our fire chief, and about 29 years with the Belleville Fire Service. And we wish him well in his evolution into semi-retirement, I guess, if we can call that. I'd like to remind residents of the City of Belleville that we are now have winter parking restrictions in effect. In accordance with the city's parking bylaw, overnight parking on all city streets is prohibited beginning November the 2nd and continues until April the 14th. Parking control officers wish to thank all local motorists for their cooperation in complying with overnight parking restrictions, and they should be on notice now that there'll be some further, little less gentle reminders. There have been a number of events since the last meeting that we have had. I was pleased to attend a new business opening at the Bazaar Artisan Market. I was also fortunate to get a tour of the Arabella Retirement Home on Dundas Street, which I believe on November the 16th, it welcomed its first residents to that retirement facility. Clearly, development in Belleville is booming, and it's great to see retirement residences as part of this boom to meet our needs. I was also attended earlier this month to attend the virtual briefing, the lockup briefing for the provincial budget. It was a great experience, and I was honored to have been invited and given a little bit of information by the Deputy Minister in terms of the direction the province was going in. This year in our community, we had 2 Remembrance Day ceremonies, albeit very different from previous years. One was at Thurlow, in Thurlow Ward at the Elmwood Cemetery, and I was pleased to have been joined by Councillor Sannison and Councillor Carr for that. And then the main event, as always, on November 11th at the Cenotaph. Although things looked very different this year, we still we came together to honor and remember those that served and gave the ultimate sacrifice for us, and they were very moving tributes to our veterans. As Councillor Kelly said, the Festival of Lights has now begun in Belleville. I hope everyone will take advantage of the beautiful lighting display that was adapted for COVID-19 this year all along our waterfront trail. Christmas, as we said, is going to look different for many people, and the lighting display provides a safe activity for families during the pandemic. I'd like to thank the staff and volunteers and donors who have made this year's display better than we've ever had before. Saturday, we had the honor to say goodbye to our colleague Pat Culhane. There was a drive-by of the procession here at City Hall where many members of the community, including city staff and all of us on Belleville City Council, attended. City Hall meant so much to Patricia, and it was moving to see so many people out to pay their respects to a woman who did so much for so many of us. Yesterday morning, I'm trying to remember my days. Yesterday morning, I and Councillor McCaw had the pleasure to attend the Habitat for Humanity official move of a new home that was donated by Andy Gertzma and his partners. This new home was moved onto property that is owned by the City of Belleville and donated to Habitat for Humanity, which will greatly speed up the process for giving a new family a home, and we were very proud to be invited to that event. I was unable to attend the Santa Claus parade last night, that drive-through parade, but I've heard wonderful reviews, and I also extend my gratitude to the Chamber of Commerce for taking on the organization of that event, and for all the participants. There was about half that we normally have, but they braved the elements themselves, stood still while people drove by in the rain, in the sleet, in the snow, and it was a wonderful event. I am debating how strongly I should word my disappointment at a number of people in the community who have chosen to suggest that it was poorly organized, that it was the wrong location, and other disparaging comments about the people that have done it. You know, this has been a difficult year for a lot of people, and I know that perhaps not tempers, but patience is wearing thin. And the easy thing for the Chamber of Commerce and the City of Belleville would be to cancel the annual parade, as many other communities have done. The turnout yesterday was overwhelming, and it was significant. And anybody who forecasted that would be wrong, because we had the opposite advice as well, that it would be down considerably this year. So, you know, I just encourage everyone to take a step back, take a breath. 2020 is a different year. If your children cannot last 3 or 4 hours on an activity, you shouldn't take them out to anything, because this is the reality we're dealing with. If you have to use washroom facilities when you're out for 2 or 3 hours, you shouldn't have gone to the parade last night, and that there was no other location that would have been better for that event, and nor was there a different route that would have been there. This is what happens when we are starved for activities and events, and people showed up. The good news is most people came through. While we certainly sympathize with those who weren't able to attend, and we know it must be disappointing, there is a long list of disappointments from this year that all of us have helped. And I can tell you that there are many parents who would give anything to have their children crying and disappointed in the backseat of their vehicles because they didn't get to go to a Santa Claus parade. Families who don't have their children with them this year. And so, you know, I say this because I think a lot of people are getting to the point where they are fed up. We are all fed up. But loving each other is the only way we're going to go through. Having understanding, having patience, having compassion is the way that we need to move forward. And I'm disappointed in those who chose to lash out at the volunteers, the organizers who have done this. Again, they could have said, we're not going to put it on like so many other communities did. But instead, we persevered, we put this on, and I, for one, am grateful for the people who stepped up and the people who said thank you and showed gratitude. And we will be back next year, back to normal, where we will have a 2 to 3 hour parade where people will sit and watch it along Bridge Street as it goes from west to east across the city, and we will enjoy all of those activities. But we've got to stay together as a community, and we really do have a wonderful community. Lastly, I'd like to state that November is Women's Abusive Prevention Month. I ask that you help me in spreading the word for this important cause, the Women's Abuse Prevention Month. The organization Grand Quinte every year coordinates the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence starting on November the 25th, the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, which will run until December the 10th, which is Human Rights Day. The bridge in the city of Belleville, the Bridge Street Bridge, will be orange to represent this cause. Therefore, I, Mitch Panchuk, Mayor of the City of Belleville, proclaim the 16 days from November 25th to December the 10th as Orange Days. Unite to end violence against women and girls in the City of Belleville. With that, I will ask for that bylaw number 2020-224, a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council at its meeting held on November 23rd, 2020, be read a first, second, and third time, and finally passed this 23rd day of November 2020. Moved by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Millette. All in favor. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Carr and Councillor Williams. All in favor. Carried. Thank you.